The knock came at sunset, soft but desperate, like someone afraid to disturb the world, but more afraid of being ignored. Jack Brennan set down his coffee and listened. The sound came again, 3 more knocks, weaker this time. When he opened the heavy wooden door of his cabin, he found a little girl standing on his porch. She had no shoes. Her dress was torn and dirty, hanging loose on her thin shoulders. Her feet were cut and bleeding from walking across the rough Montana ground. What was her eyes that stopped Jack cold? They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much for a child barely 7 years old. "Mister," she whispered, her small voice cracking with fear and exhaustion. "Can you help me?" They said you're the only one who ain't scared of them. Jack's blood ran cold. He knew exactly who that meant. In Bitter Ridge, Montana, when a child showed up at your door talking about them, it could only mean one family, the Harwicks. And if this little girl was standing on his porch barefoot and bleeding, it meant something had gone very, very wrong. Jack Brennan was 32 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work on his small ranch. His hands were rough and scarred, his face weathered by sun and wind. 5 years ago, he had been a different man. 5 years ago, he had a wife named Sarah and a daughter named Mary. They lived in a little house in town, and Jack worked as a deputy sheriff. Sarah taught school, and Mary was 8 years old with pigtails and a laugh that could light up any room. Then one night, their house caught fire. The sheriff said it was an accident, maybe a knocked-over lamp. But Jack knew better. He knew because of the way people looked at him afterward. He knew because Sarah had been asking too many questions about certain families in town. He knew because his little girl Mary had started having nightmares about the bad men weeks before she died. After the fire, Jack quit his job and moved to a small ranch outside town. He kept to himself, spoke to few people, and tried to drink away the pain. But he never stopped wondering what really happened to his family. And he never stopped being angry. The little girl on his porch was shivering now, though the October evening was not that cold. Jack knelt down, so he was at her eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Emma," she said. "Emma Crenshaw. My mama and daddy died 2 years ago. I've been living with my aunt in town, but she rents me out to work for folks." Jack's jaw tightened. He had heard whispers about children being rented out to work for wealthy families. It was supposed to be just cleaning and simple chores. But Jack had his suspicions it was much worse than that. "The Harwicks," Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been making me work at their big house. Cleaning, cooking, serving at their parties. But today I heard something. Something bad." Jack stood up and looked around the darkening landscape. His ranch was 5 miles from town, surrounded by rolling hills and scattered trees. If someone was chasing this child, they could be watching right now. "Come inside," he said. "We'll talk where it's safe." Emma followed him into the small cabin. It was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table, and 2 chairs. Jack poured her a cup of water from a pitcher and watched as she drank it down quickly. Her small hand shook as she held the cup. "Tell me what you heard," Jack said, sitting across from her at the table. Emma's eyes filled with tears. They was talking in Mr. Caleb Harwick's office. Him and his brother Silas. They didn't know I was cleaning nearby. They said they got to get rid of some kids who know too much. Kids who've seen things they shouldn't have seen. Jack felt his heart start a race. "What kind of things?" "Bad things, mister. Real bad things. They hurt kids. They sell kids to bad men who come through town. And they kill people who try to stop them." The room seemed to spin around Jack. All these years, he had suspected the Harwicks were involved in his family's death, but he had never had proof. Now this child was telling him his worst fears were true. "Emma," he said carefully, "do you know what happened to my family 5 years ago? My wife Sarah and my daughter Mary." Emma's face went pale. She nodded slowly. "Your little Mary," she whispered. "She tried to help us kids. She would sneak us food when we worked at parties. She told us she was going to tell her mama and daddy about what the Harwicks was doing to us." Emma's voice broke. "That's why they killed her and your missus. They made it look like an accident, but it weren't no accident. Jack's hands clenched into fists on the table. The rage he had carried for 5 years suddenly had a focus, a target. His wife and daughter had died because they tried to protect children like Emma. They died because they were good people who could not stand by and watch evil happen. Where are these other children now? Jack asked. Some of them work in town during the day, go back to their families at night. But some of us ain't got families. We sleep in the basement of the Harwick house. There's maybe 10 or 12 of us. Jack's stomach turned. Children living in a basement, forced to work, probably beaten and worse. It was more horrible than he had imagined. Emma reached into the pocket of her torn dress and pulled out something small and dirty. It was a little cloth doll with brown yarn hair. The dress on the doll was stained with something dark. "This was your Mary's," Emma said, holding out the doll with trembling hands. "She gave it to me the day before they hurt her. She told me to keep it safe. She said if anything happened to her, someone would come looking for the truth. She said to give this to that someone." Jack took the doll with shaking hands. It was small and simple, the kind of toy a mother makes for her daughter from scraps of cloth. Sarah had made this for Mary. Jack remembered watching his wife sew the little dress, remembered Mary carrying the doll everywhere. "But Mr. Emma said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "There's more. Your Mary, she was smart, real smart. She had things that could prove what the Harwick's been doing." Jack looked up from the doll. "What kind of things?" "I don't know exactly, but she told me she wrote it all down. Every name, every face, everything she's seen. And she hid it somewhere safe, somewhere only her daddy would know to look." Before Jack could ask more questions, Emma suddenly stiffened. Her eyes went wide with terror as she stared out the window. "They found me," she whispered. "The Harwicks are coming. And they got something bad planned for tomorrow. Real bad. And it ain't just me they're gonna hurt." Outside, Jack could hear the sound of horses approaching in the darkness. Multiple riders moving fast. He blew out the lamp on the table, plunging the cabin into darkness. Whatever was coming, whatever Emma knew, and whatever his daughter had hidden, Jack was about to find out if 5 years of anger and grief had made him strong enough to face the truth. The little girl with no shoes had knocked on his door, asking for help. But Jack was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, she was the one who was about to help him. Jack grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and moved quickly to the window. Through the darkness, he could see 3 riders approaching his cabin. They moved slowly, deliberately, like men who were in no hurry because they knew their prey had nowhere to run. The moonlight caught the silver buckles on their saddles and the gleam of weapons at their sides. "Get down behind the table," Jack whispered to Emma. The little girl dropped to the floor immediately, pulling Mary's doll close to her chest. Jack could see she had done this before, hidden from dangerous men. The thought made his anger burn even hotter. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the cabin. One of them called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "Jack Brennan, we know you got something that belongs to the Harwick family. Send the girl out, and we'll ride away peaceful-like." Jack recognized the voice. It was Tom Bradshaw, one of Caleb Harwick's men. Tom used to be a decent ranch hand before the Harwicks got their claws into him. Now he was just another hired gun who did their dirty work. "Don't know what you're talking about, Tom," Jack called back through the closed door. "Ain't nobody here but me." "Now, Jack, we both know that ain't true." Little Emma ran off from where she belongs. Her aunt's worried sick about her. "We just want to take her back safe and sound." Emma made a small sound of fear behind the table. Jack looked back at her and saw the terror in her eyes. Whatever these men had done to her before, she would rather die than go back with them. "She stays here," Jack said firmly. "If her aunt wants her, she can come talk to me herself in daylight." There was a long pause. Then Jack heard the men talking quietly among themselves. After a few minutes, Tom called out again. "You got till sunrise, Brennan. If the girl ain't outside by then, we'll come in and get her. And you know we got more men than you got bullets." The sound of horses' hooves told Jack the men were riding away. But he knew they would not go far. They would camp nearby and wait for dawn. They gave him maybe 6 hours to figure out what to do. Jack set his rifle aside and lit the lamp again. Emma crawled out from behind the table, still clutching the doll. Her face was pale, but her eyes showed determination along with the fear. "They ain't gonna give up," she said quietly. "They can't let me go. I know too much." "Tell me," Jack said, sitting down across from her. "Tell me everything you know about what the Harwicks are doing." Emma took a shaky breath. "It started about 2 years ago, after my parents died. My Aunt Ruth, she needed money real bad. The Harwicks offered to pay her if I could work at their house during the day. Just cleaning and helping in the kitchen, they said." Jack nodded, encouraging her to continue. "At first, it was okay. Hard work, but nothing too bad. But then they started having these parties at night. Rich men from other towns would come. Fancy dressed men with lots of money. And they would want kids to serve them, to do things for them." Jack's hands clenched into fists. "What kind of things?" Emma looked down at the doll in her lap. "Bad things. Things that hurt. Things that ain't right for grown men to ask children to do." Jack felt sick to his stomach. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it from a 7-year-old girl made it real in a way that cut through him like a knife. "How many children?" he asked. "Maybe 15, 20. Some live there all the time in the basement. Others, like me, they bring in when they need us. If a kid tries to run away or tell someone." Emma's voice trailed off. "What happens?" "They disappear. The Harwicks say they ran off or got adopted by a family in another territory. But I seen the fear in the other kids' eyes. We know the truth." Jack leaned forward. "Emma, you said my Mary tried to help you. Tell me exactly what happened." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her small hand. "Your Mary was different from most kids in town. Most of them were scared to talk to us working kids. But Mary, she would sneak us food at parties when the grown-ups weren't looking. She would whisper kind words, tell us we were brave." Jack felt his throat tighten. That sounded exactly like his daughter. Mary had always been drawn to children who were hurting or lonely. One night, about a week before the fire, Emma continued, Mary saw something she shouldn't have seen. One of them rich men hurt a little boy real bad. Mary started crying and ran to help him. Mr. Caleb Harwick grabbed her and told her if she ever said anything about what she saw, bad things would happen to her family. But she told her mother anyway. Jack said, more statement than question. Emma nodded. She told me she was going to tell her mama everything. She said her mama was smart and brave and would know how to stop the bad men. Mary said she was going to write down all the names and faces she could remember, just in case something happened to her. Jack's heart was pounding, and she hid this somewhere. She said she hid it where her daddy would find it if something happened to her. Somewhere special that only he would think to look. Jack's mind raced. Or would Mary hide something that only he would find? They had shared many special places. The old oak tree where they used to have picnics. The creek where he taught her to skip stones. The hill behind their house where they would lie on their backs and look at the stars. Suddenly, Emma reached into her dress pocket again. This time she pulled out something that made Jack's blood run cold. It was a small silver locket, tarnished and dented. Jack recognized it immediately. It had belonged to his wife, Sarah. She had worn it every day since their wedding day. Where did you get that? Jack whispered. Your Mary gave it to me the night before the fire, Emma said. She said if anything happened to her, I should give this to her daddy along with the doll. She said it would help you find what she hid. Jack took the locket with trembling hands. He had thought it was destroyed in the fire along with everything else. Sarah had kept a tiny picture of Mary inside it. With shaking fingers, Jack opened the clasp. The picture was still there, but it was not alone. Folded up behind it was a tiny piece of paper. Jack unfolded it carefully. In Mary's careful 8-year-old handwriting, it said, Daddy, look where we watched the stars dance. Under the big rock that looks like a bear. I love you. Jack knew exactly where she meant. There was a hill about half a mile from their old house where he and Mary used to go on summer nights to look at the stars. Mary always said the stars looked like they were dancing in the sky. And there was indeed a large boulder on that hill that, if you used your imagination, looked like a sleeping bear. She hid the evidence there, Jack said, more to himself than to Emma. Emma nodded. But, mister, there's something else. Something I ain't told you yet. Jack looked at her, seeing new fear in her young eyes. Tomorrow night, the Harwicks are planning something big. I heard them talking about moving all the basement kids to a new place. Somewhere far away where nobody will ever find them. And they said something about getting rid of anyone who might come looking. Jack felt the walls of the cabin seem to close in around him. Not only were these monsters planning to take the children somewhere worse, but they were also planning to kill anyone who might try to stop them. There's more, Emma whispered, her voice so quiet Jack had to lean forward to hear her. They said something about you, Mr. Brennan. They know you've been asking questions around town about what really happened to your family. And they said, she paused, swallowing hard. They said it was time to finish what they started 5 years ago. Jack sat back in his chair, the full weight of the situation crashing down on him. The Harwicks were not just planning to hurt more children. They were planning to kill him too. And if Emma was right about them moving the children tomorrow night, this might be the last chance anyone would ever have to save those kids. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, a lonely sound that seemed to echo the desperation Jack felt in his heart. But alongside the desperation was something else. Something he had not felt in 5 years. Purpose. His wife and daughter had died, trying to protect children like Emma. Now Emma had brought him the key to finding the evidence Mary had hidden. Maybe, just maybe, he could finish what his family had started. But first, he had to make sure Emma lived through the night. Because as the hours ticked toward dawn, Jack knew the men outside were not going to wait much longer. Emma looked up at him with eyes that held both hope and terror. What are we going to do, Mr. Brennan? Jack picked up his rifle and checked to make sure it was loaded. We're going to fight back, sweetheart, and we're going to make sure those children get the help they need. But even as he said the words, Jack wondered if one man and a 7-year-old girl could possibly stand against the power and evil of the Harwick family. Outside, he could hear horses moving in the darkness. Time was running out faster than he had hoped. Jack's hands trembled as he took the blood-stained doll from Emma's small fingers. The fabric was faded blue calico, the kind Sarah used to sew for their daughter. He could still see Mary's face lighting up the Christmas morning she'd received it, clutching it tight as she promised to love it forever. She kept it with her, Emma whispered, her voice barely audible in the flickering lamplight. Even when they heard her, she wouldn't let go. Jack's jaw clenched as he examined the doll more closely. There was something odd about its weight, something that didn't feel right. His fingers found a small opening along the seam, carefully hidden by Mary's inexperienced but determined stitching. There's something inside, he said, more to himself than to Emma. With gentle precision, he worked open the seam. Inside the cotton stuffing, his fingers found folded papers, protected by a piece of oilcloth. His heart nearly stopped as he recognized Mary's careful handwriting on the first page. Daddy, if you're reading this, it means they got us. But I hid proof. Look where we used to watch stars. The letter was dated 3 days before the fire that killed his family. Jack's vision blurred as he read further, his daughter's words painting a horrific picture of what she'd witnessed at the Harwick mansion. There are children kept in the cellar. They cry at night. Mrs. Harwick brings men to see them, and they give her money. Mama said we had to tell Sheriff Coleman, but Emma says he's one of the bad men, too. Emma nodded solemnly. Mary was brave. She wrote down everything she saw, every name she heard. Even when Miss Sarah got scared and wanted to run away, Mary said somebody had to stop them. Jack's hands shook as he read the list of names his 8-year-old daughter had compiled. Sheriff Coleman, Judge Morrison's brother, 3 prominent businessmen, and a dozen others. All customers in Caleb Harwick's sick enterprise. There's more, Emma said quietly. Mary hid other things too. She said to look where you watch stars together. Jack's breath caught. Their special place. The old oak tree behind the house where he used to hold Mary on his lap, pointing out constellations and telling her stories. if there was more evidence. We have to get it, he said, standing abruptly. Tonight. But Emma grabbed his arm, her small fingers surprisingly strong. No, Mr. Brennan. They're watching. I seen them when I came here. 3 men on the ridge, another by the creek. They're waiting for you to do something stupid. Jack peered through the curtains. In the moonlight, he could just make out movement on the hillside. She was right. Going now would be suicide, and it wouldn't help the children who still needed saving. Then we get help, he said, his mind racing. Doc Morrison's been treating those kids, hasn't he? He has to know something. Emma nodded eagerly. And Father Miguel. He gives them food sometimes when Miss Harwick ain't looking. And Miss Rose at the saloon, she asks questions about missing children. They all know, but they're scared. Jack paced the small cabin, Mary's letter clutched in his fist. For 5 years, he believed his family died in an accidental fire. Now he knew the truth. They'd been murdered for trying to save children, just like Emma. The rage burned in his chest, but alongside it grew something else. Purpose. Tomorrow, he said finally, we gather everyone who's willing to stand up. We get Mary's evidence, and we end this. Emma smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. A small, fragile thing, but real. Mary said you'd know what to do. She said her daddy was the bravest man in the whole territory. Before Jack could respond, a sound made them both freeze. Hoofbeats, multiple riders, approaching fast. Emma's face went white with terror. They found us, she screamed, diving behind Jack's chair. The Harwicks are coming. Jack grabbed his rifle, checking the chamber as the thunder of horses grew louder. Through the window, he could see torches in the darkness, at least 6 riders surrounding his cabin. Emma, he said quietly, remember what Mary taught you about being brave? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Good, Jack said, cocking the rifle. Because tonight we're going to need every bit of courage we can find. The riders formed a tight circle around Jack's cabin, their torches casting dancing shadows across the wooden walls. Jack counted 6 men, all armed, all wearing the arrogant sneer he'd come to associate with Harwick's hired guns. Caleb Harwick himself sat tall in his saddle, his silver mustache gleaming in the firelight. Brennan, he called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd never been denied anything. Send out the girl, and we'll make this quick for you. Jack positioned himself at the front window, rifle ready, while Emma crouched behind his old trunk. She's under my protection now, Harwick, he shouted back. You want her? You'll have to come through me. Caleb's laughter was cold as winter wind. You always were too stubborn for your own good. Look how that worked out for your wife and daughter. The words hit Jack like a physical blow, but they also crystallized his resolve. These men had murdered his family. They'd hurt Emma and God knows how many other children. Tonight it ended. Emma, he whispered, not taking his eyes off the windows. Can you load rifles? She nodded quickly. Mary taught me. Said every cowboy's daughter should know how to help her daddy. Jack's throat tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Good girl. Stay low and keep feeding me ammunition. A shot rang out, splintering the wood near Jack's head. The siege had begun. Jack returned fire, his bullet catching one of the riders in the shoulder and spinning him from his saddle. His years as a Union sharpshooter in the war hadn't been forgotten. 5 left. The Harwick men spread out, some taking position behind his barn, others using the woodpile for cover. Jack had the advantage of knowing every inch of his property, but they had him outnumbered and surrounded. Brennan, Caleb called again. This is your last chance. Give us the girl, or burn with her like your family did. A Molotov cocktail sailed through the air, crashing against the cabin's sidewall. Flames licked up the logs, and smoke began seeping through the chinks. Emma whimpered, but she continued reloading with steady hands. Mr. Brennan, the back window. There's someone coming. Jack spun, firing just as a gunman tried to climb through. The man fell backward with a cry. For left, but the fire was spreading. Then, through the smoke and gunfire, Jack heard the most beautiful sound in the world. More hoofbeats, but these from the direction of town. Jack, Doc Morrison's voice carried across the night. Hold on. 3 riders thundered into the firelight. Doc Morrison with his medical bag bouncing on his hip, Father Miguel clutching a Winchester like he knew how to use it, and Rose Sullivan riding astride like a man, her red hair streaming behind her. The tide had turned. "You're surrounded, Harwick," Rose shouted, her voice carrying years of suppressed rage. "Drop your weapons." But Caleb wasn't finished. He spurred his horse toward the burning cabin, pistol blazing. Jack stepped into the doorway, rifle raised, when Emma's scream cut through the chaos. "Behind you." Jack spun to see a 6th gunman he'd missed, rifle trained on his back. Time slowed. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Emma threw herself forward, her small body slamming into Jack's legs just as the rifle cracked. The bullet meant for Jack's heart whistled past his ear. Jack's return shot took the sniper in the chest. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Harwick's men lay dead. 2 had fled into the darkness, and Caleb himself sat bleeding from a shoulder wound, his hands raised in surrender. Jack knelt beside Emma, who was shaking but unhurt. "You saved my life," he whispered. She looked up at him with eyes far too old for her 7 years. "That's what family does, right?" Father Miguel and Doc Morrison secured Caleb, while Rose stamped out the last of the flames. The immediate danger was over, but Caleb's face held a smugness that made Jack's blood run cold. "You think this ends it?" Caleb laughed, blood foaming at his lips. "My brother Silas already moved the children. By dawn, they'll all be gone forever. Sold down to Mexico, where you'll never find them." Jack's stomach dropped. They'd won the battle, but the war for those innocent children was far from over. Dawn was still 3 hours away, but Jack knew they were running out of time. Emma sat beside Mary's letter, her finger tracing the carefully drawn map his daughter had made. "She drew this the day before they killed her," Emma whispered. "The old silver mine, 20 miles north." Mary said she followed one of the wagons there once. Doc Morrison leaned over the paper, adjusting his spectacles. "I've treated children with injuries that matched mining accidents. Cuts from metal, lung problems from bad air. I thought they were just working them in dangerous conditions." "It's worse than that," Rose said grimly. "I've been tracking the men who visit Harwick's place. Some come from as far as Denver, paying premium prices for." She couldn't finish the sentence. Father Miguel crossed himself. 12 souls trapped in that hellhole. We have to reach them before Silas moves them south. Jack strapped on his gun belt, his jaw set with determination. "Emma, you stay here with Doc Morrison." "No." Emma jumped to her feet, her small frame trembling with resolve. "I know the mine tunnels. Mary and me explored them before the bad men came. Without me, you'll get lost in the dark." "Absolutely not," Jack said firmly. "I won't risk you." Emma's eyes blazed with the same fire he'd seen in Mary. "Those children in there, they're scared and alone, just like I was. They need someone who understands, someone who can lead them out. You can fight the bad men, but I'm the only one who can save the kids." Rose nodded slowly. "The girl's right, Jack. Sometimes the smallest person carries the biggest key." Against every instinct, Jack found himself agreeing. They rode hard through the Montana darkness, their horses' breath steaming in the cold air. The abandoned Silverton mine sat in a valley surrounded by jagged rocks, its entrance barely visible among the shadows. 2 guards at the main entrance, Father Miguel whispered, peering through his field glasses. "But Emma, show us this back way you mentioned." Emma led them up a treacherous path to a ventilation shaft half hidden by scrub brush. "Mary and me used to pretend we were miners going to work," she said softly. "We never knew it would become a prison." The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for Jack's shoulders, but opened into a network of tunnels that honeycombed the mountain. Emma moved through the darkness with the confidence of familiarity, her small hand guiding Jack along passages he couldn't even see. Then they heard it, the sound that would haunt Jack's dreams forever. Children crying, their voices echoing off stone walls like lost souls. There, Emma breathed, pointing to a flickering light ahead. The chamber opened before them, and Jack's blood ran cold. 12 children huddled together in the corner, their ages ranging from 5 to 14. Some bore fresh bruises. Others stared with the hollow eyes of the deeply traumatized. 3 boys who couldn't have been older than 6 clung to each other, too frightened to make a sound. "It's okay," Emma called softly, stepping into the light. "I'm Emma. I was trapped like you, but this man saved me. He's here to take you home." Doc Morrison immediately began examining the children while Rose gathered them close with gentle words. But Jack's attention was drawn to footsteps echoing from the main tunnel. "They're coming," he whispered. "Emma, can you get these children out through the shaft?" She nodded, already organizing the older kids to help the younger ones. "There's another exit that comes out near the creek. I can have them safe in 10 minutes. Go. Now." Jack positioned himself at the tunnel entrance just as Silas Harwick appeared with 4 armed men. Unlike his brother Caleb, Silas was lean and vicious, his eyes holding the cold calculation of a born killer. "Well," Silas drawled, his gun already drawn. "Jack Brennan, my brother always said you were too stupid to know when you were beaten." Jack's hand hovered over his pistol. Behind him, he could hear Emma whispering encouragement to the children as they began their escape through the dark tunnels. "Those children are leaving with me, Silas." Silas smiled, a predator's grin in the lamplight. "The only thing leaving here tonight is your soul, Brennan, just like your wife and daughter before you." The final confrontation was about to begin. The gunfight in the mine tunnels was swift and brutal. Jack's military training served him well in the confined space, but it was Father Miguel's unexpected skill with a rifle that turned the tide. When the smoke cleared, Silas Harwick lay dead beside his men, and clutched in his lifeless fingers was a small silver locket that made Jack's knees buckle. Mary's locket, the one Sarah had given their daughter on her 7th birthday, engraved with tiny forget-me-nots. Jack sank to the stone floor, cradling the locket against his chest as 5 years of grief crashed over him like a dam bursting. Father Miguel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, understanding that some wounds needed to bleed before they could heal. "She's free now, Jack," the priest whispered. "They both are." Outside the mine, Emma had successfully led all 12 children to safety. Doc Morrison was treating their injuries by the creek, his medical bag open and his heart breaking at each new revelation of abuse. Rose Sullivan held the youngest ones, singing soft lullabies her own mother had sung to her decades ago. But it was Emma who surprised them all. Despite being the smallest, she had become their leader, organizing the children, comforting the frightened ones, and translating for a little Mexican girl who spoke no English. "Emma," Jack said when he emerged from the mine, his voice thick with emotion. "There's something I need to know. About Mary." Emma looked up at him with those wise, ancient eyes. "She didn't die right away, did she? That's what you're asking." Jack nodded, unable to speak. "She lived for 3 days after the fire," Emma said softly, sitting beside him on a fallen log. "The Harwicks thought she was dead, but she crawled into the old root cellar behind her house. I found her there." Jack's breath caught. "You were with her?" "I brought her water and tried to help, but she was hurt real bad. She kept writing things down, even when her hands were shaking. She said her daddy would come looking for the truth someday, and she wanted to make sure he found it." Emma pulled a small, water-stained notebook from her dress pocket. "This was her last message. She made me promise to only give it to you when the bad men were gone forever." With trembling fingers, Jack opened to the final entry, written in Mary's increasingly weak handwriting. "Daddy, I'm not scared anymore, because I know you'll save the other children like you always saved me. Tell Emma she's brave like I try to be. Tell Mama I kept my promise to always help people who need it. And Daddy, don't be sad forever. There are other little girls who need a papa, just like I did. I love you bigger than all the stars we used to count. You're Mary." Jack wept then, the kind of tears that wash away years of poison and guilt. Emma climbed into his lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck, just like Mary used to do. "She told me you were the best daddy in the whole world," Emma whispered. "She said if anything happened to her, you'd take care of me too." 3 weeks later, Federal Marshal Tom Crawford arrived from Denver with a full investigation team. The evidence Mary had gathered, combined with the testimony of the rescued children and the confession of a guilt-ridden Caleb Harwick, led to the arrest of 14 men throughout the territory. Sheriff Coleman was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Judge Morrison's brother was stripped of his position and fled to California in disgrace. Doc Morrison used the federal reward money to establish a proper children's home on the edge of Bitter Ridge. Rose Sullivan became the matron, trading her saloon dress for the practical clothing of a woman dedicated to healing young souls. Father Miguel served as chaplain, his gentle nature helping traumatized children learn to trust adults again. All 12 children from mine were placed in loving homes throughout Montana Territory. The youngest ones, who had suffered the most, went to families specially chosen for their patience and kindness. The older children, like 14-year-old Samuel who had tried to protect the smaller ones, found positions as apprentices with good craftsmen who understood that hard work and honest pay could help heal wounded spirits. But Emma stayed with Jack. The adoption papers were signed on a cold December morning, with Doc Morrison and Rose Sullivan serving as witnesses. Emma chose to keep her last name, but added Brennan to it, becoming Emma Crenshaw Brennan, daughter of Jack Brennan by choice rather than blood. "Are you sure about this, little one?" Jack had asked the night before. "I'm not an easy man to live with. I've got ghosts and rough edges." Emma had smiled, the first truly carefree expression he'd seen on her young face. "Papa Jack, everybody's got ghosts. But you taught me that the good ones help us take care of the living." The transformation of Jack's ranch was remarkable. What had once been a lonely bachelor's refuge became a sanctuary for children in need. Not an orphanage exactly, but a place where kids could stay when they needed safety, healing, or simply someone who understood their pain. Emma proved to have a gift with horses that rivaled Jack's own. She could gentle the most skittish colt with patience and soft words, qualities that also made her invaluable when traumatized children arrived at their door. Many nights, Jack would find her reading to a frightened child or braiding flowers into the hair of a little girl who hadn't spoken since a rescue. 6 months after that desperate knock on his door, Jack stood in the cemetery placing fresh wildflowers on Mary's grave. The headstone now bore the full truth. Mary Brennan, beloved daughter and hero, who gave her life to save others. Emma knelt beside him, her own small bouquet in hand. She wore proper shoes now, sturdy brown leather boots that Jack had ordered specially from Denver. Her dress was clean and well-fitted, her hair braided with ribbons, but most importantly, her eyes held hope instead of fear. "Thank you, Mary," Emma whispered to the headstone. "Thank you for saving us all. I promise I'll take good care of Papa Jack, just like you would have." Jack placed his hand on Emma's shoulder, marveling at how this fierce little girl had not only saved his life, but had given him purpose again. Through the pain and loss, something beautiful had emerged. A family forged not by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds formed when broken people heal each other. As they walked back toward the ranch, Emma slipped her small hand into his calloused one. "Papa Jack." "Yes, darling. Do you think Mary can see us from heaven?" Jack looked up at the vast Montana sky, where the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "I think she can, Emma, and I think she's proud of both of us." Emma squeezed his hand. "Then let's make sure we keep giving her reasons to smile." Behind them, the lights of Bitter Ridge glowed warm and welcoming. The town that had once been paralyzed by fear and corruption had found its courage again, largely thanks to a barefoot little girl who knocked on the right door at exactly the right moment. Sometimes salvation comes in the smallest packages, arriving when we need it most, even when we're too broken to realize we're still worth saving. Jack Brennan had learned it the hard way, but he'd learned it nonetheless. And in teaching Emma that she was worthy of love and protection, he'd rediscovered those truths about himself. The healing wasn't complete, it might never be, but it was real, and it was enough. It was enough to build a new life on, one rescued child at a time.